What's up guys, this is Nefarious Intent back for part 6 of the Minecraft 1.8 hacked client coding tutorial. Today I'll be teaching you how to add settings to the TabGUI as well as chroma effects in the user interfaces. So without further ado, let's open our Eclipse and get right into it. The truth. This series is brought to you by Intent.store. If you're looking to get a premium Minecraft hacked client, look no further. They have amazing clients, link in the description. In order to add settings to the TabGUI, we first have to introduce a settings system to our client, which it doesn't currently have. So it's not actually that complicated. We just make a couple classes that extend off of each other to give us a structure. We can add them to the modules and then we can start enumerating them in the TabGUI. We can get started by creating a new package called intent.settings. Then we'll create a new class inside that package called setting. In setting, we're going to create a public string called name, and it's not going to have anything in it because this is going to be our prototype for all settings. Next, we're going to create another class called Boolean setting, and it's going to extend off of the superclass setting that we just created. In Boolean setting, we're going to create a new public Boolean called enabled. Then we're going to use Eclipse's source feature to create us a constructor using fields. Make sure to omit the call to super, and then you're done with that part. Next, we want to use Eclipse's getters and setters generator to create our isEnabled and setEnabled. And then we're also going to want to create an additional method called toggle, like so. Public void toggle, which will set the state of enabled to the opposite of what it currently is. That's what the exclamation point operator does. Now Boolean setting is complete. Next, we're going to create a number setting. New class number setting, which extends off of setting, just like Boolean setting. Inside this one, we're going to create a public double value as well as minimum and maximum and increment. Then we're going to go to source, constructor, and getters and setters. And before we're done with number setting, we want to make sure that the value assigned to value is math minimum comparing to the maximum and the value at hand. Removing that. And math.maximum is comparing to the minimum and the value out of that. So this basically makes sure that the value assigned is between the minimum and maximum values of our number setting. And then before we're done with that, we need to make sure that we lock it to the increment we've set. So whether that's half a number or an integer, we just want to make sure the value assigned is aligned with that increment system. So we're going to create a new double here called precision, and it's going to be equal to 1 divided by the increment. Then we're going to multiply this by our precision and round that, and then divide by the precision, and number setting is complete. Since we're implementing number setting into a TabGUI, we need to make special methods in the number setting class that allow us to increment the number setting based on the increment by our arrow keys. So this is actually pretty simple. We just create an additional method called increment, so public void increment. And then there's going to be a Boolean in here called positive. We just say set value to get value plus increment. And then instead of plus, we're actually going to say positive question mark increment and then -1. And we're going to encapsulate that in parentheses and multiply it by increment. And this means that every time we hit the arrow key to go up or down, based on whether it's positive or not, it'll add to the value based on the increment, or it'll subtract from the value based on the increment. We're also going to change both of the settings we just created so they accept names. So name, and then we're going to set the parent value name equal to the name in the argument there. We're also going to do that for a Boolean setting. We're going to create string name and set name equal to that. Now we can get started on mode setting. We create a new class called mode setting. Extend setting. We create a new public integer called index. We create a new public list with the type string called modes. Import that from util. Make a constructor. Change this constructor to string name as well. This dot name equals name, and we're going to change the list to a var_args array so that we can really easily add different modes. And we're also going to create an argument called default mode. So we're going to change a couple things. We're going to change this to arrays.asList. So this will convert our var_args array to an actual list, which is much easier to deal with than an array. And then we also want to set the index equal to modes, and actually this modes, so we get the list version index of default mode. Now we'll create a method called public string get mode, and it's going to return modes.get index. We're also going to create a boolean called is with a mode as an argument, and then we're going to return whether index equals modes index of that mode. And we'll create another method called public void cycle. If index is less than modes.size -1, then we will add to the index. Otherwise, we'll set index to 0. So now that we've created the setting structure, we can go ahead and add it to our module implementation. So we're going to go to module.java, create a public list of the type setting called settings equals new array list setting. Import that, and that. You may have to save along the way so it allows you to import. Then we're going to create a new public void called add settings, and it's going to have a var_args version of setting so that you can add as many settings as you want to this method and it'll be valid code. And then we're going to just say this.settings.add all arrays as list settings. And there we go. Now, if we want to add settings to a module we've already created, we just go to it. So in this instance, Killera, we create a public, in this case, number setting called range. And we'll set it equal to a new number setting with the name range and the default value being 4, with the minimum set to 1, the maximum set to 6, and the increment set to 0.1. We'll import that. We'll copy the name range. We'll type after the super invocation this.addSettings and then paste in range and save. We'll also create a public Boolean setting called noSwing equal to new Boolean setting with the name noSwing, the default value set to false. We'll import that. We'll add that to the list with a comma, and we'll create a new mode setting. So public mode setting called test, and we'll just set it to a new mode setting named test with the default value being 1 and then the values being 1, 2, and 3. We'll import that and we'll add that to the end as well. Now, if you want to implement range as an actual controllable setting, we can go to right here where 4 is mentioned, and we can just type range.getValue. If we want to implement noSwing, we can go to where swing item is called, and we can say if noSwing.is enabled. Then we'll make some space here, and we'll say otherwise swing item. And then under noSwing, we can say mc.theplayer.sendQueue.add to sendQueue new COA packet animation, and then import it. And there we go. We'll also make another setting called public number setting APS equals new number setting APS with the default set to 10, the minimum being 1, the maximum being 20, and the increment being 1. We'll then go to the place where 10 is mentioned and we'll say get value. We'll also have to cast this as a long because this is a double value. And as with the other values, we'll need to add it to the list. And in fact, I'm going to do this after range, so APS. There we go. So next, to add these settings to something we can look at, we'll go to our TabGUI. We'll go to where we're drawing the categories. Then we got to find where we're drawing the modules. And here it is. Here's where all the modules are drawn. And we want to say, in this case, we want to find the current module. So we're going to look around, and we got the category.module index. We want to say if count equals the category module index, then we're going to draw settings, but only if the module is expanded. So we have to create an extra Boolean in module called expanded, and we'll do this right above settings called public Boolean expanded. Then we'll go back to our TabGUI and say and m.expanded. Now, expanded will only occur when someone presses the right arrow on the module. So we'll go right here to where it's toggling the module, and we're going to create a copy of this block of code, but we're going to change key write to key enter, or key return in this case. It's called return because Java is multi-OS and a lot of OSs call enter return. So since we're only checking if we're actually hovering over a module instead of a category, we can get rid of that else statement, and then we can say instead of toggle, expanded, and we can get rid of this catch-all for the TabGUI. True. But we're only going to do that if module is not expanded. We want to go to key left and basically say that if the module is expanded, then we want to close that before closing the category. So it gives us an extra opportunity instead of just closing the whole thing at once, which would be stupid and unusable. So we're going to say if expanded, then we know we're looking at a module. If modules.size, or just if modules is not empty, then we want to check if the current module is expanded. So we say modules get category.module index, and we check for expanded. So if the current module is expanded, then we're going to say modules get this, and we can actually just say this whole thing right down here and say equals false. Otherwise, we'll close the current tab. We can go back to where we checked if the module was the current module and if it was expanded, and then we can say we need to draw a rectangle basically. So just like before, we'll take this example, we'll paste it down here, and instead of modules.size, we'll do m.settings.size. We do need an index, so we're going to go into module, and we're going to create another integer here, so public integer, and call it index. And this is basically our settings index for what setting we're looking at currently. We can go back to our TabGUI, and we can say instead of category.module index, we do module or just m.index, get rid of this, and paste it here as well. We're also going to need to shift these rectangles over, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of math. I think we'll just copy the 68 and we'll paste it on both the x-axes like so. We're also going to need to draw the names of the modules, so we can copy this, sort of. We'll copy this part of it, we'll paste it down here. We're going to change this whole thing to settings setting out of modules.settings, which not modules.settings, m.settings, import setting, and change m.name to setting.name. And instead of count, we're going to create another variable called index. We're going to set it to 0 there, and then we're going to increment it as we go. And we're going to plug this into count instead of count. I've started up the client so we can debug it, but we're also going to need to move over the text by that same increment. So there we go. And if we were to expand Killara by pressing enter, we'd see that. Now the issue is that this blue rectangle is the same distance as the edge of this rectangle. So when I go down, which I can't right now because we haven't added that functionality yet, but when I do, it'll just look weird. So we've got to fix the TabGUI so that there's space on both sides of the blue bars. We're going to remove 2 from that part of it, and we're going to add 2 to this part of it so it goes to the full length. And as you can see, you've got this sort of design, and then we're going to subtract 2 from the top by going over here, changing this to 31, and then we need to change that to 31.5. Wait, my bad, we need to change that to 30.5. There we go. And then we need to add 2.5 more to the blue, not the gray. Like so. And this is what we get. And we should also do that for Killara. Subtract 2 from there. Add 2 to the end. So 70. Which that's for settings, so you wouldn't notice until then. Over here, we want to change this to 70 as well. And then we want to subtract 2 from the top. So 30.5, 2.5 actually, and then add 2.5 to the bottom. There we go. And then lastly for settings, we want to do the same thing as well. Plus 2.5 and 30.5 over here. And this is what we get. Is it the best design ever? Probably not, but it's sort of pleasing. Everything is equidistant apart. It doesn't have any weird artifacts like the one previously. And if I were to go down, which I can't right now, but if I was able to, it wouldn't look as bad as it would have before. So now we're going to allow ourselves to go down the index of the different settings. So we're going to go to key down, and we're basically going to find out if we're expanded. So we're going to copy this statement here. We're going to go to key down, and we're going to say if we're expanded, then we want to do something other than this. We basically want to copy this and repurpose it for our settings. So we want to create a new local variable here called module equal to that. We're going to say if module.index is greater than or equal to module.settings.size, then we're going to set the index to 0. Otherwise, we're going to add to the index. And we want to do a similar thing for key up. So we're going to paste this here. We're going to close it up with a bracket, and we're going to create an else statement to encapsulate this. And then we're going to copy this and repurpose it like we did before by changing category to module, module index to index, modules.size to module.settings.size, and there we go. So now if I go down the list, you can see it's working. And if I were to go to movement, obviously it's empty, so there's no settings to really deal with, but as I'm pressing the buttons, it's not affecting these, it's just staying in its own zone. So now we go back to Killara, and we need to test out this to see if it works with all the different key events. So as we can see, it's looping around perfectly. But if I press the right arrow key, it's still toggling Killara, so we want to stop that. So we're going to go to key right, and we're going to make sure you're not expanded in the settings. So again, we'll paste this here, and we'll make the else statement. And we'll drop this part of it into it. So now if I press the right arrow while I'm in settings, nothing happens yet. Now we want to go where we're drawing the settings, and we want to make a little customization. So instead of just drawing the same string for everything, we want to handle each setting uniquely. So we're going to say if setting instance of Boolean setting, we're going to create a new local variable of the Boolean setting called bool, and we're going to set it equal to setting but casted to Boolean setting. So now we get access to the is enabled. So we can drop this font renderer draw string into here, and we're going to change it from setting name to setting name plus colon bool dot enabled. And if we were to save that, we would see over here it says it's false. Now we could do better than this, so we're going to change it to enabled and disabled. So we'll say for enabled question mark enabled, otherwise disabled, and we'll have to wrap that in parentheses. And this is what we get. Now we can't toggle this yet, but when we do, you'll see. So now we need to basically adjust the settings list to accommodate the different settings we have so it doesn't go off the edge. So the rectangles are just long enough for the longest setting, and everything else will work. So we need to finish what we're doing here with the different unique settings so that we can simulate it before we actually draw this. But first we have to make our prototype. So after Boolean setting, I'm going to make a number setting called number. Import number setting. Then we're just going to say number dot get value. And as you can see, we got range is 4, APS is 10, and lastly for mode setting, we import, we paste, we call this mode, and we say mode.getMode. And this is what we get. So now we want to make it so that it draws the rectangle at the right distance. So we can copy this statement right here. We can paste it above its rectangles. We can erase the integer declaration over here and reuse the same index. And then we're going to create another integer called max length equal to 0. And then we're going to say for each of these, if max length is less than fr.getStringWidth with this pasted in, then max length equals this. And we can erase the drawstring from that. And we're going to copy this to all the other places and paste in their strings. And now we can take this max length and we can apply it to the length the rectangle's drawn. So instead of 68 for the width, we're going to paste this in and see what happens. And here we're getting an approximation of how long it should be. Now we need to adjust it a little bit because it's drawing from the beginning of the string to the end of the string. We have some space over here and we want an equal amount of space over here. So we can add some constant like 6 to the end. Okay, we'll try 8, and I think 8 will be good. If we want to make it 9 just so that the shadow is equidistant, we can do that as well. And there we go. Now we need to interact with these settings, which is also not a crazy hard task. So now, following this hierarchical structure, we're going to go down to Module. We're going into Setting, and we're creating an additional Boolean here called Focused. And we're going to have to terminate the application because we've created a new variable, but we'll immediately restart it. And at the top, we're going to create a new integer called primary color. And we're going to set it equal to the blue we've been using. And we're going to create another one called secondary color. And we're going to set it equal to a darker version of this. So all we have to do to make it darker is choose something like 70 and AA. And we can experiment with what that looks like by pasting it into where the rectangle is drawn. And as you can see, this is a darker color to signify that that setting is focused. Now we're going to apply the primary color everywhere. So we're going to do a search, paste in primary color, and those are the only places where primary color is used, except where secondary color was drawn, so we'll paste it there as well. And now if we were to change the primary color, it would affect all of them. And the secondary color is currently unused, but we're about to use it. So we'll go to where the setting rectangle is drawn, which is here. We're going to say im.settings.get im.index .focused. Then we're going to use the secondary color, otherwise we're going to use the primary color. So at the moment, all of the settings are not focused, so we have to allow those to be focused. So we can do this by going to where return is and saying otherwise, if module is expanded, then we want to get the current setting. So module.settings.get module.index .focused equals the opposite. So an exclamation point. And now if we press enter, it toggles whether it's focused. Now the only problem is we only want one of them focused at a time instead of as many as we want. So we want to lock everything else while one of the modules is focused. So we're going to take this variable and we're going to go to other places like up and down, and we're going to say if module is focused, we can make a space there and then say else, we're going to go perform what was normally performed for key up in that section. So now, while something's focused, we can't press the up key, but once it's unfocused, we can. And we're going to do the similar thing for the bottom, so key down. We're going to say that, else, this section. And now, when we're focused, neither of the arrow keys work. We're just stuck on this one setting. But we can still go back, so we want to change that as well, so that if we're focused, you can't leave until you toggle it off. So we'll go to key left, and we'll say that, else, that. And we'll also need to create a local variable module by copying one of the above ones and pasting it in. So now, when we're focused, we can't go out of it and do anything currently until we unfocus, and then we can do everything else. Now that we're able to handle when a module is focused, we want to allow you to change the settings. So this is a case-by-case thing, but basically we want to create an object for the current setting and then go to different places like key up, key down, and key right and handle those there. So in this case, we're going to go to key right, and then where we can tell if the setting is expanded, we want to create a setting object called setting, set it equal to the current module setting, which is settings.get module.index. And since we have the module local variable here, we can also replace this and this. So now that we've got the setting variable, we can say if setting instance of Boolean setting, then we want to cast the setting to Boolean setting and call toggle. Now, if we were to go to a Boolean setting and press the right arrow key, you can see it's toggling it. Now we want to handle the mode value as well. This is very similar. We'll copy the statement, change it to mode setting, change the cast as well. And instead of toggle, we'll type cycle. Then if we go to the mode setting and we press the right arrow key, it cycles through all of them. So now we've got Boolean settings and mode settings working. So lastly is number setting, the most complicated, but none of them are really too complicated, so it's not that bad. So we're going to take this part of the code that we just made, and we're going to go to the places key up and key down, and then we're going to get where the setting is focused. And in this case, key up, we're going to change this to number setting, change the casts, and type increment. And for key up, we want to make the number bigger. So we're going to choose true for positive. And then in key down, we're going to paste the same code in and tab to indent. And we're going to change this to false. Now, if we're to focus one of the number settings and we press enter, we go down, it should make the number smaller. If we go up, it makes the number bigger. And if we go to the edge of the number, the limit, it caps. So there we go, number settings done. If we throw down a sheep and we turn on kill aura, as we can see, our no swing is enabled, so we'll turn that off. So now we're swinging again, and we'll change the range. So we'll turn this down to something like 1, where it's really short, then we'll throw it down, and boom, we're not hitting until we're really close. And we can turn it up, and it'll make it longer and longer until we're actually hitting it farther away than a vanilla player should be able to. And we can also change the speed. We can bring that down to something like 1, very slow. Or we can bring it up to something like 20, where it's insanely fast and it'll probably get you kicked from an NCP-based server. Now there's one case left that we need to fix, and that is for modules that don't have settings, because currently if you press enter, it's going to crash the client. So we'll start back up the client, but then while it's starting, we'll also go to the place key return, and we're going to say if expanded and module.settings is not empty. Now if we go to single player, go to a module that doesn't have settings and press enter, we still crash, but it's for a different reason. It's because we're trying to get a setting that doesn't exist. So we need to put a little if statement here and say if m.settings is not empty, then do all the drawing routines. Now if we run the client again, it should work and not crash. It does crash, but for another reason. So we need to go to our key up statement and say if module.settings is not empty, so exclamation point as well, then perform all of this code. And we need to do it for key down as well. So right here, and indent, and for key right, where a setting is called, and for key left, where a setting is assumed. Now if we start up our client, there should be no issues. And here we have it. Sprint is not crashing, but the only problem is we're expanding and we don't need to be. So we need to go to key return and say if the module is not expanded and module.settings.is not empty, which also means it has settings. And then if we restart the client because we've done something impossible, it works. Modules that don't have settings just don't act like they have settings, and modules that do work. So that's TabGUI settings for you. Now we're going to add rainbows to our client. So it's also not super hard. We're going to go create some new space here in the TabGUI. Now this isn't going to be our permanent place where we store the rainbow, but as we develop it, we'll just use it here for the TabGUI colors. So we're going to start by making a float called hue, and it's going to be equal to system.currentTime millisecond, with 1 second being the period, so 1000 milliseconds divided by 1000 float. And then we're going to create an integer called color, and we're going to set it equal to color.hsb to RGB. And for the first argument, it's going to be our hue. For the second argument, it's going to be our saturation, which we want as 1 right now, and our brightness also 1. And we're going to paste the color into primary color. And what we get is this really fast moving rainbow, probably way too fast. So we can change our period to something like 2, and we're also going to need to divide by 2000 now, and we get something half as fast. And we can change to 4, and we get a rainbow that only cycles every 4 seconds. So if we want, we can make another variable called float seconds, and we can set it to the amount of seconds we want it to take, and we'll just multiply that by 1000 here and 1000 here. And as you can see, we've broken it because this needs to be cast to float and this needs to be cast to int. So as we can see, we have our 4-second rainbow. We can change this to something like 6.5 seconds, which we'll also need to add the F2 to make it a float, and that'll work, 6.5 seconds. But I think I'm gonna stick with 4 seconds for this. And if we want to, we can adjust the saturation of it by changing this number here to something like 0.8 F, and we have a slightly less harsh rainbow, 0.5 is almost a candy color. In this case, I'm gonna choose 0.8 for our rainbow, but you can choose a different color if you want to. And then our brightness, I'm gonna leave as 1, but if you wanted to make it something less, like 0.8 float, you'd get a sort of darker rainbow, and we can use that for our focused property for settings. But in this case, I'm going to take this whole block, I'm gonna extract it as a method and call it getRainbow. Set it to public, and there we go. We're gonna have to terminate the application, but then we're gonna go to our getRainbow and we're gonna add some properties here. So we're gonna create a float called seconds, and we can get rid of the seconds here. We're gonna create a float called saturation, and we're gonna replace the saturation with this, and we're gonna create a float called brightness, and we're gonna paste that here. And we're going to create a whole new class that we can call colorUtil in util. ColorUtil. We're also gonna wanna change this to static before we move it. So then we refactor, move, browse, colorUtil, and send it off. And now we can go up here and plug in the properties we need. So 4 seconds, 0.8 saturation, and 1 brightness, and save. Now we can get rid of the color variable we've created and just plug it into primary color. And for secondary color, we can use the 0.8. So now if we start the client, what we get is our rainbow on everything. And if we focus something, it makes it darker, just like we wanted. Now we can apply this same effect to the array list, which we can access by going to our HUD, going to the one place where blue is mentioned, right here, and pasting it in. And then when we turn stuff on, that's what we get, rainbow client. And if you want to apply those same colors to the main menu, we can go copy this again, open main menu. So Control-Shift-R to get that menu I just opened. And then we're gonna go to where the blue is drawn, and we'll just paste that in. And there we go. And lastly, before I'll go, I'll allow you to set keybinds in the TabGUI. So we're gonna create a new setting here. We'll just make a new one called keybind setting. We'll extend off of setting. We'll make a public integer called keycode. We'll make a new constructor, so keybind setting, and we'll just have keycode as the only input. And then we'll set this name equal to keybind. We'll set this keycode equal to keycode, and we'll allow the getters and setters to be automatically generated. Then we'll close this, go to module, and change keycode to the type keybind setting, and we'll set it equal to a new keybind setting with 0 as the only input. And then over here, instead of setting keycode, we're going to do keycode dot keycode equals key. And actually, because of the name contamination, I'm just going to change this by refactoring it to code and paste in all the little places there. All right. So this little error right here can be solved just by adding .code. That's alleviated all the errors. Now we just need to make it so we can actually set it. In the constructor of module, this dot add settings, and then there we go. Keycode is now added to the list of settings. This won't be an issue for modules that don't have settings, but for modules that do have settings, this means the keycode will be drawn at the beginning of the list, and you probably don't want that. If you do want that, just ignore this part. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sort the settings list when settings are added another time so that keycodes is on the bottom. So we're going to say after settings are added, this dot settings dot sort comparator, import that comparator dot comparing int, make a little s local variable there with the arrow, and then say s dot equals equals keycode, then 1, otherwise 0. And I believe we want to invert that, so exclamation point equal sign, and we can start our game, but it's not going to be drawn yet because we haven't handled it in any of the unique situations. So we're going to just copy from mode setting, paste down keybind setting here and here, change this to keybind, and then we're going to say keyboard dot get key name, and then keybind dot code, and we'll paste that here as well. Down here at mode setting, we're going to copy that as well. Boom, boom, boom. Keybind. Copy this right there. Now if we check it out, it should be drawn, and it is. But the problem is it's at the top. And I think the only thing we have to do to get it to not be at the top is actually undo what I thought was going to make it work in the first place. And we check it out. Did it work? It did work. There we go. Okay, all we have left to do is handle the unique cases for what actual keys are pressed. So we're going to take this down to, actually, we're going to create up here at the top, if expanded, so the category is expanded, and modules are not empty, and the current module, so modules.get category.module index is expanded, and we want to actually open this up a little bit. Copy this, make a local variable for module called that, and we're going to say if module.settings is not empty and module.settings.get module.index is an instance of a keybind setting, then we know we're focusing on a keybind setting. Actually, we don't know we're focusing yet. We're about to. So then we're going to say if that setting is focused and the rest of that. So now we know we're focused on a keybind setting. So everything here should be returned after this input, unless a few things happen. So if the code is keyboard.key return, then we want to not do any of this. We want to bypass the return statement. So we want to say if it's not equal to keybind return, then we do this. But otherwise, we want to actually just pretend this didn't happen and return. So then we want to make a couple extra caveats and say, and the code is not equal to keyboard.key up and key down and key left and key right and key escape. Then we will actually say we want to get the current setting, so we'll do this. We'll make keybind setting an instance called keybind, and we'll cast what we're about to cast as a keybind setting, paste that in, and now we have an instance of the keybind, and we're just going to say keybind.code equals code, and then keybind.focused equals false. And now if we set a keybind, so we press enter and we press a key like J, it's bound to J now. And if I set it back to X, it's bound to X now. And if it's bound to W, then that happens. So I'll set it back to X. And there we go. So there's your TabGUI settings, your rainbow, and your keybind. This concludes part 6 of the Minecraft 1.8 hacked client coding tutorial, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye.